This is an art collage novel video. I made this series so you guys can experience the story faster. The video will focus on the character's psychology, the images are for illustration purposes only. The war between the two races had started because of him, so he would pay attention to it no matter what and do his best. Thinking about it again, the last time the sea race launched a large-scale invasion, it was also because of him. It seemed that he was indeed a troublemaker. He was still the same even after changing his appearance. After making up his mind, he didn't think too much about it and started to cultivate in peace. 3 days later, Yunxiao, who was sitting quietly in the Divine Realm tablet, suddenly felt a flash of light, and his body trembled. The demonic dragon, who was sharing his soul with him, also opened its eyes from its cultivation. It was overjoyed. His soul power, which had been stuck at the peak of the 8th rank, finally broke through the shackles and began to charge toward the 9th rank and above. At Yunxiao's will, all the resources in the Divine Realm tablet rushed to him. The spirit chi had already turned into threads and wrapped around him like a silkworm spinning a cocoon, slowly wrapping him up and condensing into a solid spirit cocoon. 10 days later, the chrysalis finally began to move slowly. It peeled off bit by bit, turned into spirit chi, and dissipated. Yunxiao's figure appeared, sitting cross-legged with a peaceful look on his face. He suddenly opened his eyes, which were as red as blood. His moon-like pupils emitted a strange light, and his pupils suddenly shrank into strange symbols. The surrounding space instantly became dark, and his entire body disappeared in the darkness. From a distance, it was like a black hole, devouring all light. Then, the darkness collapsed and shrank rapidly, turning into a black dot and disappearing. Yunxiao's figure appeared again, and the look in his eyes returned to normal, but he could not hide his joy and cold pride. With a thought, he returned to the training room. He saw a small pendant hanging behind the door. It was emitting a faint purple light, which was very eye-catching. This was a signal that someone was looking for him. Yunxiao stood up and opened the door of the training room. 2 jade talismans flew in and fell into his hand. Yunxiao separated them, and it turned out that they were sent by the same person, inviting him to some party, and the signatures were all from a man named Liang Yuanji. He looked at the time carefully. The gathering was to be held today, at the Raging Flame City's Ju Yuan Pavilion. After pondering for a moment, Yunxiao turned into a beam of light and flew toward Ju Yuan Xian. In any case, he had just broken through to the 9th tier of soul power, so it would be difficult for him to make any further progress in a short period of time. The Gathering Yuan Pavilion was located in a corner of the Raging Flame City. It was very secluded and quiet, and in this kind of tense environment, it seemed particularly elegant. He had just turned into a ray of light and landed when a martial artist came forward to welcome him. "This lord, are you invited?" "A man named Liang Yuanji invited me here," Yunxiao said. "I'm here." The warrior said in surprise, "Lord Yuanji? Then you must be Lord Li Feiyang?" Yunxiao nodded. "Lord Feiyang, please come in," the martial artist said hurriedly. "The lords have already gone in. I was instructed by Lord Yuanji to wait for you here." The martial artist led the way in front. After breaking through the front yard, he could faintly hear the sound coming from the main hall. When Yunxiao walked into the hall, all the voices stopped, and more than 10 or 20 people in the hall turned to look at him. "My lords, this is Lord Li Feiyang," the warrior hurriedly explained. "Oh." The eyes of a cultivator sitting at the head of the hall lit up as he hurriedly stood up and greeted with a smile, "Oh, it's Lord Feiyang. I am Liang Yuanji." The moment Yunxiao entered the hall, he swept it with his divine sense. There were 19 people in the hall, and all of them were martial honors. Liang Yuanji was at the peak of the martial honor realm, and the primordial energy fluctuations emanating from his body were extremely strong. He did not seem to be an ordinary peak martial honor. "Lord Yuanji," Yunxiao cupped his hands and said politely, "May I know why I have been summoned?" At this time, a middle-aged man with red hair could not help but say, "Lord Yuanji, could you have made a mistake? This kid is so young, could he be an 8 stars martial supreme?" "You can't judge a book by its cover. I can see that this kid's yuan power is restrained, and I can't detect his true cultivation base with my divine sense. Even if he's not an 8 stars martial supreme, I'm afraid he's not far away. An old man beside the red-haired man was smoking from a copper pipe. The red-haired man was in disbelief after hearing this. He said in shock, "Even Elder Yen can't tell his cultivation level?" Elder Yen glared at the red-haired man and snorted, "Is it strange that you can't tell? Everyone's cultivation technique is different, or he may have some treasure on him." Yunxiao gave Elder Yen a look. The smoke exuded a refreshing fragrance that made one's internal organs relax with just a sniff. It was a rare spirit herb. The old man was not simple either. By inhaling the spirit herb like this, he was breathing in and out primordial energy all the time without any delay. Liang Yuanji laughed and made an inviting gesture, then arranged Yunxiao to sit in a seat closer to the front. There's no need for everyone to doubt it. This is the cultivation level detected by the profound sensing weapon. Lord Feiyang's true strength can only be higher and not lower. What's more, it's rare for him to have the responsibility to take on the rise and fall of the world. Yunxiao's face darkened. He wondered what expressions everyone would have if they knew that he was the one who had started the war between the two races. It's indeed rare. Kid, you have a bright future ahead of you. Elder Yan's eyes narrowed. There was a glimmer in his eyes. The other 10 or so people echoed his words, and their praises were endless. They also wanted to get on Yunxiao's good side. After all, as an individual cultivator, the road of martial Dao was much more difficult than those big sections. It was good to make a few more friends, especially these kinds of existences with a very promising future. Maybe one day, they could help him. It's just for a huge reward. There's no need to make it sound so noble. The red-haired man was obviously very dissatisfied. A contemptuous sneer flashed across his face as he turned his head away. Liang Yuanji said indifferently, "No matter what their intentions are, it's a good thing that they can step forward in such a dangerous situation. I, Liang Yuanji, admire them from the bottom of my heart." One of the larger warriors said coldly, "I, Guan Xingyang, just want to see how those sea beasts are. How dare they attack humans? They really don't know what's good for them." "Brother Xingyang's wish will come true very soon," Liang Yuanji said with a smile. "I hope so," Guan Xingyang said. "But I've been living in Raging Fire City for almost a month, and I haven't received any transfer orders. I'm afraid the Sea Tribe has already retreated." Elder Yan took a deep breath of smoke and exhaled. The smoke turned into some strange patterns and disappeared. He said slowly, "If Guan Xingyang was right, then I wouldn't have gained anything from this trip and wasted a month. Lord Yuanji, have you reimbursed me for my travel expenses?" Liang Yuanji laughed and said, "If the sea race is tactful enough to retreat, that would naturally be for the best. If that's the case, I'll definitely apply to the Red Moon City to pay each of you at least 100,000 supreme-grade primordial stones for your hard work." Elder Yen gave him a thumbs up and smiled, interesting. Everyone was overjoyed. Although 100,000 supreme-grade primordial stones was not a lot, it was still a fortune for poor cultivators like them. Moreover, they had obtained it without putting in any effort. Everyone liked it. Yunxiao's forehead broke out in a cold sweat as he looked at everyone's happy faces. He knew that he had joined a poor organization, and he would not even bother to pick up 100,000 supreme-grade primordial stones on the ground. My point of view is the exact opposite of Sir Xingyang's. I'm afraid I'll soon be dispatched. Oh? Why do you say so? Liang Yuanji looked surprised and asked, "Could it be that Lord Feiyang has some news?" Everyone was looking at him. Yunxiao smiled and said, "There's no news. However, on my way to Juyuanxian, I discovered that the atmosphere in the city was even more tense than when I came to Blazing Light City. It seemed to reflect the pessimistic situation ahead." Liang Yuanji's expression turned serious as he nodded. "Lord Yunxiao's careful observation is indeed admirable. Now that you've mentioned it, I've also noticed it." "Yes," one of the warriors said. "I also found that there are more and more temporary cultivation grounds for martial honors, and they are all full of people. With that said, the atmosphere in the hall became a little heavy. Everyone was here for money, but they had to ensure their safety first. If the war was too tense, no one would throw away their lives for money. Liang Yuanji said, "Everyone, there's no need to worry too much. Although the sea race is powerful, their strength is limited. Otherwise, they would not have been in a stalemate for so long. But no matter what, the 20 of us will be arranged as a team and will be under my command. I hope that everyone will listen to the transfer orders when the time comes. If anyone oversteps, I will not show any mercy." A hint of killing intent flashed in his eyes, and everyone immediately felt as if there was a dagger on their backs. A chill rose in their hearts, and they all expressed that they absolutely would not dare to. Liang Yuanji then retracted his aura and said amiably, "I hope everyone can understand. This is related to the war between the two races, so we must all obey. No jokes are allowed." He knew the temperament of these wandering cultivators. They were the most difficult team to lead. Everyone had a strong personality. Otherwise, with their cultivation, they would be the pillars of support in any sect and would not end up as poor cultivators. Elder Yan nodded and said, "That's right. If anyone dares to do this, he will be harming everyone. I will be the first one to not let him off. As long as everyone can follow the rules, I will do my best to bring everyone back in one piece. Moreover, after this battle, we can all be considered brothers in life and death. In the future, we can look out for each other and won't be bullied by others." "That's right." Guan Xingyang laughed. "If we unite, even a martial sovereign of the 9 heavens would have to retreat." Liang Yuanji said, "That's right. If we work together, we'll be able to cut through gold. I'll be the leader, Elder Yan will be the vice leader, and the rest of you will be split into 6 groups of 3. You'll be grouped according to your strength." Elder Yan took a puff of his cigarette and said, "I'm used to being idle. I really can't be the vice captain. Lord Yuanji, you should find another expert. I'll just be a normal member." "Since that's the case, I won't force you," Liang Yuanji said. He looked at the other 2 9-star martial supremes in the field. There were only 4 9-star martial supremes in the entire field, including himself, and they were considered a relatively strong team. One of the 9-stars martial venerables was practicing some unknown cultivation technique. His entire face was pale green, as if he had been poisoned. He slowly opened his mouth and said, "Since Elder Yan doesn't want to do it, then I'll do it. I'm also very assured with the green-faced mister taking on the role." Liang Yuanji smiled. Yunxiao felt a little dizzy. He did not know whether the man's real name was green-faced, or he had just given himself a random name. If Elder Yan were to be the vice captain, Taishida, would naturally have no objections. But for the green-faced man to be the vice captain, it's really hard to listen to. The other 9-stars martial venerable immediately revealed a dissatisfied expression and said, "I think other than Elder Yan, I'm the most suitable person for this position." The green-faced man's face turned even paler, and a cold aura emanated from his body. He said in a cold voice, "Oh? Are your bones itching again, Teshida?" Liang Yuanji's head started to hurt. He was afraid of teams like this, where everyone was on their own and did not have a united spirit. This was also the greatest weakness of rogue cultivators. In terms of individual strength, rogue cultivators were generally stronger than sect disciples of the same cultivation level. However, in terms of unity, they were far from it. Taishida stood up from his chair and pointed at the green-faced man, saying fiercely, "My bones are itching, so what? If you're not convinced, then fight." The green-faced man jumped up from his chair and attacked without saying a word. He rolled up a green cloud in front of him and directly attacked. "Shut up." Liang Yuanji's expression changed. "All of you, quiet down." With a wave of his wide long sleeves, Universe Creator appeared in the hall. With a flash of black light, it swallowed the green cloud. Liang Yuanji stared at the green-faced man and said coldly, "This is the first and the last time. It's also the last time for all of you. If anyone dares to attack your own people, I won't say a word. I'll kill them immediately." The green-faced man's face twitched. He snorted and sat back in his seat. Taishida did not say a word, but the light in his eyes grew colder. Liang Yuanji had a headache. How could he bring such a team out to face the enemy? He looked at Elder Yen for help, but Elder Yen pretended to be stupid. He smoked his pipe and looked up at the ceiling. Liang Yuanji was helpless. He looked around and suddenly had an idea. I wonder if Lord Feiyang is interested in being the vice captain. What? He? Everyone was taken aback, mainly because Yunxiao looked too young, and these people were all uncultured. Even if he had the cultivation base of an 8-stars martial supreme, it would be difficult for him to shock everyone. Many people were snorting, obviously unconvinced. The red-haired middle-aged man snorted a few times as if he was afraid that no one could hear him. Yunxiao was also stunned for a moment. He did not expect Liang Yuanji to point at him directly. When 3 9-stars martial venerables were not up to the task, it was indeed the 8-stars' turn. But there were 4 8-stars martial venerables in the hall, and the other 3 looked unconvinced at the moment. I'm young and inexperienced. Besides, my strength is limited. I'll just be a member, he said. At least you know your place. The red-haired man was also an 8-stars martial supreme. He sneered and the corners of his mouth curved up to his nose. Liang Yuanji smiled and said, Lord Feiyang, you're too humble. Even I can't see through your true cultivation level. Then, it must be higher than what the sensor mystic artifact detected. Furthermore, Lord Feiyang can predict the battle at the front line from the atmosphere of Lieguang City. You're also a very observant and thoughtful person. I think you're the most suitable person. Yunxiao immediately felt 18 pairs of eyes staring at him, but he did not feel uncomfortable with his status. He only felt that he was being roasted on a fire rack by Liang Yuanji. Even if I'm willing, many of my friends are not. This will only add to the team's troubles. Liang Yuanji's gaze sharpened slightly, but his smile remained on his face. This will depend on Lord Feiyang's ability to deal with trouble. Yunxiao met Liang Yuanji's eyes and saw the desire in his eyes. His heart stirred, and he agreed. All right, I agree to be the vice captain. We might not agree even if you do. The red-haired man finally flipped out on the spot and said coldly, what right do you have to command us? Liang Yuanji's expression turned cold as a wave of pressure pressed down on them. He shouted, do you want to make the same mistake a second time? The red-haired man's face turned pale under the pressure, and he hurriedly circulated his qi to resist it. A muffled explosion exploded in front of him, and he was forced to retreat. He said in horror, Lord Yuanji, please don't be angry. It's just that I'm not convinced by him. I'm also an 8-star martial supreme, why is he the vice captain and not me? Liang Yuanji replied coldly, my decision is an order. I've already made myself very clear just now, are you trying to overstep your boundaries? The red-haired man's heart jumped. He could already feel Liang Yuanji's killing intent. He didn't dare to say anything more, and his eyes were filled with hatred. We will naturally listen to Lord Yuanji's words, but if he sends a young boy to order us around for no reason, it is really difficult to obey. Another 8-stars martial supreme walked out and stood beside the red-haired man. Lord Yuanji, I have always respected you, but I have indeed made a ridiculous mistake this time. Guan Xingyang's face was also solemn. He stood up and walked to the 2 to protest, after all, fighting against the Sea Tribe is no joke. We have to be responsible for our own lives. We can't put our lives in the hands of people who we don't trust. Right. The 3 lords are right. The crowd echoed his words one after another, all of them not optimistic about Yunxiao's chances, and it was even more unacceptable for them to follow his orders. The green-faced man and Teshida's faces were cold and full of ridicule. Elder Yen was still smoking his pipe and leaning lazily on the chair. Liang Yuanji immediately felt a headache coming on. This was the difficulty of leading unaffiliated ancient martial art practitioners. They had to be convinced of everything before they would listen to him. However, this team had started to have internal strife before he had even brought them out. He immediately lost his confidence. Such a small team would probably be destroyed the moment they entered the battlefield. The red-haired man was overjoyed when he saw everyone supporting him. He stared coldly at Yunxiao and said, "Kid, it's not that we're looking down on you, and it's not that we're not giving you a chance. The simplest way is to start a martial arts competition. If you can defeat any one of us, I'll be convinced that you'll be the vice captain." "That's right, I also agree." Guan Xingyang and the other 8 stars Marshal Venerable nodded. They did not mean to make things difficult for Yunxiao, but it was a matter of great importance and could not be taken as a child's play. Liang Yuanji's eyes immediately fell on Yunxiao. His lips moved slightly as he sent a voice transmission. Although Guan Xingyang's origin power pressure is more intense, his path is too fierce. I know this person's background. He's a genuine poor cultivator without any trump cards. It should be the easiest to choose him. He gave Yunxiao an encouraging look, hoping that he would fight and suppress the situation. Yunxiao smiled wryly in his heart, but his face was expressionless. He stood up from his seat with his hands behind his back and said indifferently, "The 3 of you can come at me together. I won't fight back within 3 moves each. After 3 moves, as long as you can block one of my attacks, I'll admit defeat." "What?" The crowd was shocked and stunned for a moment, then burst into laughter. Everyone bent over with laughter, and some even burst into tears as they looked at Yunxiao sarcastically and swayed. What did he just say? I'm dying of laughter. He's going to fight 1 against 3 without retaliating? And after 3 moves, he only used 1 move to make the opponent admit defeat? Why didn't he say that he just glared at the 3 of them and they died? All kinds of ridicule came, but Yunxiao's expression was indifferent, because this kind of thing could not be explained, and it was disdainful to explain. The result would soon be clear to everyone. Liang Yuanji was also stunned for a moment. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. Only now did he feel that his decision was childish and ridiculous. No wonder everyone was against it. Such a reckless young man who spoke without thinking was indeed too young. He could only blame himself for having a particularly good impression of him, which was why he had the idea of promoting him. But now, he had completely given up. He also looked at Yunxiao coldly, planning to see how he would end up. On the other hand, Elder Yan's lazy look was replaced by a serious look as he stared at Yunxiao, as if he wanted to see through him. The red-haired trio was so angry that they laughed, amused by Yunxiao. Good, good, you really have guts. You want to let the 3 of us have 3 moves, right? Then we'll thank you. He looked at the other 2, who also shook their heads and sighed with a bitter smile. However, to cooperate with the red-haired man, they also said, "If that's the case, then we'll have to offend you." The 3 of them flickered and disappeared from where they were. In the next moment, they were next to Yunxiao and attacked at the same time. With a fierce look in his eyes, the red-haired man clenched his fist and swooped down from the sky with a whistling sound. The other 2 lazily attacked Yunxiao from the front and back. Their plan was simple: to prevent Yunxiao from escaping, they would let the red-haired man teach him a lesson. Yunxiao casually took out his right hand from behind him, took a step forward, and put it on the red-haired man's wrist. What? The red-haired man was taken aback. Before he could see Yunxiao's movements clearly, he found that his palm had been restrained, and the circulation of his primordial energy had been cut off at the spot where the palm hit. A chill ran down his spine, and he realized that he had laughed at the wrong person.